invite only. But what we normally do is put a recording of the meeting onto the Nestrans website as soon as we can after the meeting, so it is available to the public. My intention would be to introduce members of the Nestrans team as we go through the meeting. Various members of the team have prepared papers in front of you today, and I'll ask individuals to present these one at a time and maybe introduce them at that point, if that's okay. Back to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rab. I'm just going to go through the members now, and I'm going to do it just in alphabetical order. So the first one I have on my list is Councillor Cox.
Present. Yeah, present.
Thank you. Councillor Crawley.
Yes, present.
Okay. Councillor Davidson.
Good afternoon, I'm present. Did you want us to say a little bit more about who we are?
If you're happy just to say you're present at this stage, that's absolutely fine. If you want to say a little bit more, also fine. It's entirely up to yourselves.
So I'm an Aberdeenshire councillor, and I'm new to this, and I'm new to infrastructure services. But I've been a councillor a long time.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Hutchison.
I'm Michael. I'm one of the SNP councillors for George Street Harbour in the city. I've been a councillor since 2015 and I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm also a councillor in the same ward as Michael in George Street Harbour. I'm a Labour councillor and I have been on the board previously when it started up. I was also an outside member of the board when I wasn't a councillor, and I was on the board for the last 5 years, of which I was vice chair and chair on the board. So very pleased to be back again and ready to serve the people of Aberdeen and the North East Aberdeenshire as well.
Thank you. Councillor Radley.
Hi, I'm Miranda Radley. I represent Kincorth and Cove in Aberdeen, and I'm the SNP Deputy Group Leader.
Thank you, Miranda. Councillor Reid.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Glenn Reid. I'm new to Nestrans, so bear with me. I'm a councillor for East Geary, which is Kintore, Blackburn, Newmarket and Hatton Infantry, if you don't know. Cheers.
Thank you. And Councillor Yule.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ian Yule. I am co-leader of Aberdeen City Council and leader of the Liberal Democrats in Aberdeen City Council. I have been a councillor for even longer than Isabel Davidson, in fact, a lot longer than Isabel Davidson. And I am, although I wasn't on the Nestrans board recently, I'm a former chair of Nestrans. I look forward to working with you all for the next 5 years for the benefit of Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire.
Thank you. And our external members, Mr. Alanak.
Hi, I'm Colin Allenach. Yeah, I'm an external member. I've been on the board for, I think, for about 2.5 years now. Particular interest in active travel, but in transport in general.
Thank you. Dr. Bockel.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I've been vice chair of the board for the last 5 years, but was a member of the board for a couple of years before that. And prior to that, I was an advisor to the board in my capacity as head of planning and sustainable development at Aberdeen City Council. So long track record of being on in and associated with the Nestrans Board.
Thank you. And Mr. Ross.
Good afternoon, Ian Ross. I'm a non-councillor member like Maggie and Colin. I've been on Nestrans Board for about 3 years now, and I'm a consulting engineer with various interests in transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also going to get the experts from both the Shire and the City to introduce themselves because they may pop up at various stages. So Mr. Wood, is Mr. Wood here yet, or is he still delayed? I think he's delayed at the moment. So Mr. Dunn.
Thanks very much, Karen, and I enjoy being called an expert. My name is David Dunn, and I'm the Interim Chief Officer of Strategic Place Planning at Aberdeen City Council. So within my remit, I have the transport strategy team, and hence my engagement with Nestrans on a fairly regular basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have apologies from one of the other external members for today, so we'll raise that at the time. And Mr. Wood's hoping to join us at some point once his meeting has finished. So the RAB has already went through the part about the meeting being recorded, so I won't have to go through that again for you. So members of the board can leave their cameras on but switch off their microphones until they wish to speak. Others participating should make sure that their microphones and cameras are off until the chair brings you into the meeting. Those observing today's meeting should also leave their cameras and microphones switched off at all times. We've received apologies from Jerry Donald, and is there any more that needs to be submitted at this time? Nothing? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda 1.1, on today's agenda is appointment of chairperson. There's been a mutual agreement over the last little while that the chair will be alternate between the constituent authorities halfway through the electoral term. So for the ensuing 2.5 years, this position falls to an Aberdeenshire councillor. Therefore, can I seek nominations for the chair of the board? Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. I'm happy to propose Councillor John Crawley as chair of the board.
Councillor Crawley, okay. And do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Hutchison. Are you happy just to second that position?
Yeah, second.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And Councillor Crawley, are you willing to accept that position as board chair?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Chair, at this stage of the proceedings, do you want me to take you through the rest of section 1 of the agenda, or do you want to take us through?
I'm happy to leave that to you for this time. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Yule, I saw you put your hand up briefly. Are you wanting to come in at this stage?
I was preempting item 1.2. My apologies.
Okay, so we will now move on to item 1.2. So this is the appointment of vice chairs. We don't know what happened there. I managed to mute myself. Oh well, maybe not a bad thing. I'll start that again. So yes, we have 2 vice chairs for the board. One will be from Aberdeen City Council and the other will be from within the external members. I'll take the nomination for vice chair for Aberdeen City Council first, please. Councillor Yule.
Thank you. I'm delighted to propose Michael Hutchison.
Hutchison, okay. And do we have a seconder for that position? Oh, Councillor Radley, sorry.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. And then on to the external member. Do we have a nomination for vice chair from the external members?
I would like to nominate Dr. Maggie Bochel.
Dr. Bochel, okay. And do we have a seconder for that position? Mr. Ross.
Yes, I would like to second that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to agenda item 1.3, which is the appointment of advisors. Members at this stage, the board are required to confirm the appointment of advisors, those being Mr. Alan Wood from Aberdeenshire and Mr. David Dunn from Aberdeen City. Are the board happy to confirm those members? Yeah, okay, thank you. On to agenda item 1.4, equality monitoring. We're required to notify Transport Scotland of the makeup of the board. This would be your opportunity to notify me of your preferred pronoun. If you prefer, you can email me out with the meeting to advise of this. It's just something we have to do. We have to give that soon after the board meeting, but happy to receive anything privately if you wish. Okay, so we'll leave that one for now, and if we get anything in the next little day or two, then that's fine. Agenda item 1.5 then is declarations or transparency statements. So do any members of the board have any declarations of interest or connections that they wish to notify us of? Nothing at this stage. Okay, thank you, members. And finally, you'll be glad I get to have a rest soon. The last item under section 1 is the minute of previous board meeting. So members are requested at this stage to approve the minute from the April meeting as a correct record. This can only be done by returning members, so for those who were actually in attendance at that meeting. Are members happy to approve that minute? And is there a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Cox.
Yeah, I'm happy to approve the minute of the previous meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. And is there a seconder for that? And Councillor MacDonald, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Chair, that's the end of section 1 of the agenda. So I'll hand over to yourself to lead us through with the support from Mr. Dixon.
Right. On item 2, all I got is presentations, and I've had no other information on that. So
thank you, Chair. If I could come in there, we tend to stick to a standardised agenda. On occasions, we have had presentations, notably from external experts, maybe on a particular subject, so on aviation or on railways, for example. On occasion, we've even been fortunate enough to have transport ministers in that slot. So with this being the first meeting of the new board, I haven't arranged for a presentation formally today, but that's an opportunity to have external or even partner presentations in future meetings. So item 2 is there, but today there's not being taken up.
Okay, thank you. I would say, first of all, on the list of attainees, some of the councillors' names don't come up as councillors, so if I do get it wrong at any time when it comes up, please forgive me till I get to know everyone. On item 3, the budget matters, I haven't been given a list of officers, so if I can ask, is it Karen to go for the officers as we go through these, and I'll refer them to you?
I think Mr. Dixon will help support with his members, yeah, with his officers.
Right. Yeah, happy to do that, Chair. Item 3.1 is the annual audit plan. And I think we've got with us today the external auditor, which is Anne MacDonald. So I would hand over to Anne, if that's okay, to present item 3.1 for members.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Sorry, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. As Rob just said there, my name is Anne MacDonald, and I'm Senior Audit Manager with Audit Scotland. And for the last few years, I've been the external auditor to the board. So this is our annual plan for the 21-22 audit. And for those of you who were on the board previously, hopefully you'll recognise the format. So this is the 6th year and the final year of our audit appointment. And once we conclude the audit of the 21-22 accounts, we'll be handing over to Grant Thornton, who have recently been appointed as the external auditor for the next 5 years. So just as a reminder, all the public audit in Scotland is undertaken by, is led by Audit Scotland. We undertake a procurement exercise usually every 5 years, but there was an extension because of COVID, so this appointment was 6 years. and we work with external firms. So about 2/3 of the work is done in-house by Audit Scotland teams, and the third by a number of firms, as I say, through a procurement exercise. So there's just been a rotation of auditors, and there'll be, as I say, there'll be a changeover over the summer. So we'll be auditing 21-22, and then your new auditors will come in from financial year 22-23. So returning to the plan, relative to local government, we regard Nestrans as what we call a small body, and as such, the bulk of our work is really related to the audit of the annual accounts. And generally what I've done in recent years is I've included the annual plan on the same agenda as your unaudited accounts. So that's the situation today. You have the unaudited accounts to consider on your agenda as well. Exhibit 1 on page 19 of your papers includes what we call our materiality level. And this is the level of identified error which could be permitted in the accounts without it affecting our audit opinion. There's a lower level of 44,000, which we call our performance materiality. And this really acts as a trigger for us during the audit. So if there's errors or misstatements that we identify that amount to 44,000 or thereabouts, this really acts as a trigger for us to consider what additional work we need to do in order to get the assurances that we need for the opinion. Exhibit 2 on page 20 of your papers sets out the risks as we've identified for the audit and the work we'll undertake to obtain the necessary assurances. So these risks are in line with previous years, and in accordance with auditing standards, auditors are required to consider these risks across all audits. So the two that we've identified would equally be considered for audits in commercial organisations. So the first risk we have requires us to consider the potential for management override of controls, and the second risk is the potential for financial reports and accounts to be manipulated. So, for example, through incorrect recognition of income and expenditure, and therefore the figures being misstated in the accounts. Exhibit 3 on page 24 provides a reminder of our wider scope responsibilities. For small bodies, our Code of Audit Practice allows a more limited review, and so we tend to focus on two of the elements shown there. We focus on financial sustainability and on governance. There's a number of factors that we set out at paragraphs 24 and 26 related to those areas, and we'll report back our opinions on those in our annual report, which will come to you in September with the audited accounts. At the time we prepared the plan, there were changing responsibilities in Aberdeenshire's finance team, and it's Aberdeenshire's finance team who prepare and maintain the accounting records and the annual accounts for the board. And it was unclear at that point who was going to be preparing the accounts for Nestrans for this year. There was a number of changing responsibilities of the finance team, so it wasn't clear at the point that we prepared the plan as to who would be taking up the role for this year. Since we concluded the plan, that matter's been clarified, and you have the unaudited accounts on your agenda today. But that, as I say, at the time that we prepared the plan, it was a risk because it was unclear as to what the arrangements were going to be. Exhibit 25 on page 26 sets out the timetable for reporting back on the audited accounts. And as stated there, we are aiming to be concluding the audit with you in September. Paragraph 33 sets out the audit fee, which has been agreed with the Treasurer, Mary Beattie. And finally, on paragraph 39, I'm confirming that there's no matters of conflict within my team regarding their involvement in this audit. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions? No, I don't see anyone. So I would say that we recommend the board to note that the audit plan provided by the external auditor is accepted. Moving on to item 3.2, the unaudited annual accounts for 21-22, and if I could ask Rab to come in and say who's doing that.
Thanks, Chair. We take financial support from the Finance Department at Aberdeenshire Council. I'm delighted that today we've got Moira Beverley with us, who will introduce us to items 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4. So we can hand over to Moira from Aberdeenshire Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, all. I'm Moira Beverley, and I'm the Finance Business Partner for Environment and Infrastructure Services within Aberdeenshire Council. Aberdeenshire Council has an SLA with Nestrans to provide financial services. With regards to the report, the Board is required to consider the unaudited financial accounts for the financial year 21-22. Local authorities and similar bodies are required to ensure that they demonstrate proper stewardship of their financial affairs. The accounts are prepared in accordance with the Code of Practice for Local Authority Accounting in the UK for 21-22 and presented in a format that follow international financial reporting standards. Appendix 2 details a surplus for the financial year of 1.779 million. Nestrans is now able to hold a general fund, and in 21-22 historic capital grant was also drawn down from the partners. A significant amount of the surplus has already been allocated to complete projects in 22-23. The Board are asked to consider the management commentary and the governance statement sections of the draft accounts, which include a brief description of the financial performance of the partnership over the period. The requests for final delay drawdown are presented in Appendix 3. Chair, there are two recommendations for the Board for this report. One, consider the unaudited accounts for 21-22 and approve the issue to the external auditor and the Controller of Audit as per Appendix 1. And two, approve the final delay in drawdown for 21-22 as per Appendix 3. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Maura. Is there any comments on these? Yes, Councillor Glenn Reid.
Hi, good afternoon. I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up. It's just a question, being a new member, etc. In the notes to the account, I think it's on page 69. It just mentions the Nestrans office and obviously the cost, about 460,000 pounds. Is that leased from either Aberdeen City or Aberdeenshire Council? I mean, I know that in Aberdeenshire Council we've got vacant office space, etc. I'm sure the city has as well. So it's just really whether it's actually we're actually using public funds for the public office. That's all.
Brad, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Reid. Yes, we have a small office in King Street, Archibald Simpson House, which is a listed building and is owned by Aberdeen City Council. So we lease that from Aberdeen City Council. I should emphasise, though, that in terms of that line in the accounts, that includes the staffing costs, which is the major element of that amount of money. So that's not the rent we're paying on the office, it's the cost of the office, including the staff. We've a staff or an establishment of 9 members of staff, 1 vacancy at the moment, but 8 members of staff who'll be supporting you today. But yes, 27 to 29 King Street is the office City Council owned, as you ask. Thanks.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Okay, there's no other question, so we would say the recommend the board to consider the unaudited annual accounts for 21-22 and approves their issue to the external auditor and the controller of audit as per Appendix 1 and approves the final delay in drawdown for 21-22 as per Appendix 3. Okay, thank you. And if I can go on to more to do the next 3.3, please.
The Board approved the 22-23 budget during the Nestrans February meeting. The offers of grant from Scottish Government, Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Council have been advised and accepted. Appendix 1 sets out the summary monitoring to May 22 with a total expenditure budget of 6.299 million before today's environments requests. Spend to date being 139,000. As the year progresses, we expect to bring reports to the board detailing any variances and requests for environments. Appendix 2 details the budget approved in February for the coordination and the project development budget for 22-23, with the previously agreed continuation of funding for projects from 21-22 in February and April incorporated. Appendix 3 details the budget approved in February for the Strategic Investment Programme for 22-23, with the previously agreed continuation of funding for projects from 21-22 in February and April also included. A successful grant funding application to Transport Scotland of 500,000 has been accepted for Regional Transport Partnership Active Travel. There are detailed environments for approval in Appendix 4. Should these be approved, this would bring the overall Nestrans budget to over 7 million. There are still 16 developments still to be claimed from the Strategic Transport Fund balance of 485,000. There were no claims made in 21-22. There are 5 recommendations, Chair. 1, to note the monitoring position and the forecast as presented in Appendix 1. 2, note the funding awards to Nestrans that have been confirmed for 22-23 and agree the minor modifications proposed and shown in Appendices 2 and 3. 3, approve the environments set out in Appendix 4. 4, note the additional grant funding awarded in 22-23 through the RTP Active Travel Grant. And 5, note the Strategic Transport Fund position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Have we got any questions on this? Councillor Sandra MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of small questions. One was on the, let me see, it's in the Appendix 4 on the environments. I was just interested to know under the active travel budget heading where the cycling advanced stop lines and advisory lining was due to go in. Is that, I suppose, just more widely, is it somewhere in the city, shire, or is there a particular place, or is that still to be decided where that's going? And I guess my other one was around the electric vehicle charging points, where there's a considerable sum on page 94. And again, it was just to get a sense of that. Is that spread across the region, or is there somewhere in particular where we think that's going to, in a geographical sense? Not, and it's in no way being divisive about shire or city, but it's just interesting to know from my point of view. Thanks.
Chair, if I may just in general sense say that we work out the budget in consultation with officers from both Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Council. So we try as much as we can to get a fairly even spread across the two council areas. We very much see Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire as equal partners in the Nestrans partnership. There are occasionally strategic schemes which we see as of benefit to the whole region, but we do try to get that split as even as we can. In terms of the specifics, Councillor MacDonald, I've got Jennifer Anderson, who keeps her spreadsheet with pink and blue allocations to try and ensure we get that spread as much as we can. Obviously, on a year-to-year basis, it doesn't always work out exactly equal, but the intent is to try and get it as close as we can. So I'll bring in Jenny on these two specific points, if I may.
Thanks, Rob, and apologies, I should probably have said in the appendix, but the cycle advanced stop lines and advisory lining is just generic updates throughout Aberdeen City. It was the City Council that requested budget to upgrade. I think just the age of some of them, they're beginning to fade, and the charging points, it was Aberdeenshire Council that are delivering these at a number of locations. Sorry, I will try and improve it in the future.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've literally just got the one question. On page 68, you've got the rate of inflation to pensions, and you're only counting it as 3.3%. That's maybe put a liability on us at a later date.
I'll take that one, please. That's what we've been quoted from our consultants just now, so I can take that forward for you.
I think it would just be nice to get an answer on that if they're actually looking at that.
I will do, Chair. I'll take that forward.
Okay. So no more other questions. Can we recommend that the board accept notes 1 to the recommendations 1 to 5 as we went through on the paper? And I will move on to the next one, 3.4, Nestrans pensions discretion.
Nestrans staff pensions are administered by the North East Scotland Pension Fund, who have contacted the board as they require to review and update their discretions policy, which is held by the fund. The date for which this is to be completed is the 5th of August. Nestrans staff are employed under the same terms and conditions as Aberdeenshire Council staff. Currently, Nestrans is seeking the advice of HR and Finance within Aberdeenshire Council, who are currently working on their own review of the discretions policy. Given that the next board meeting is not until September, it is suggested that the board approve the same policy as adopted by Aberdeenshire Council. Therefore, Chair, there are 2 recommendations on this report. 1, to delegate authority to the Nestrans Director to adopt Aberdeenshire Council's position on employer discretions in their Statement of Discretions policy and submit it to NESPF by the deadline of the 5th of August. And 2, instruct a report to the next meeting of the board with the Statement of Discretions policy for further review prior to publication. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this? Take it. No hands are up. So I move that we recommend the points 1 and 2 brought up on this paper.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to strategy 4.1, the director's report. And if I could go over to Rab and find out who that is, we can do it.
Thank you, Chair. At each board meeting, I normally do a report giving an indication of the liaison and the meetings that have been held since the previous meeting, and a brief, normally 1-line summary of the key elements of these meetings. There are a couple of meetings which we normally bring the minute of the meetings to the board for information, really. And these are the Health and Transport Action Plan. I've got 2 minutes because there's been 2 meetings since they were last with the board for information at Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. The Health Transport Action Plan is chaired by Jerry Donald from NHS Grampian, who is an external board member. So there is that linkage between the board and the HTAP steering group. And the third one, Appendix 3, is a note of the Bus Alliance Board, which again we bring to the members after every formal meeting for information, so you can see what is going on with the Bus Alliance. There is, on this occasion, a full report on progress on the Bus Partnership Fund, which we'll come to at item 5.1. But the minute of the last Bus Alliance Board meeting is there for members' information. So members are asked to note the progress on these various meetings, but happy to provide a fuller feedback if anyone has questions on or around any of the areas of work. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have Councillor Glenn Reid.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just really on the active travel transformation meeting on the 10th of May, and obviously it says in there about the Scottish Government's ambition to be perceived as a leader in active travel. Can you maybe expand a little bit and just tell us, the members, you know, how they actually plan to do this? I'm quite interested in this.
Yep, thank you. It was a meeting actually addressed by Patrick Harvey, MSP, who, as members may know, is the Minister with responsibility for active travel under the Minister for Transport. The Scottish Government budget has seen increasing amounts of capital active travel funding. We have been able to bid for some of that, which was mentioned in the budget report, and we've got a fuller report on that at item 6.1 on what we're doing on active travel. The key message really from the Minister, though, was that the administration at the Scottish Government are looking towards 10% of the transport budget being available for active travel. So it's really to alert members of the scale of ambition and the opportunity that's available if we and the local authorities, in partnership with the likes of Sustrans, can think about developing and bringing forward schemes. There is funding available in the coming years. We did have a launch of the Walking and Cycling Index, which Sustrans and the City Council have prepared for Aberdeen on Monday evening, I think it was, at the Art Gallery. And a real interest in how much is happening and how much interest there is in active travel in and across the Northeast. So I don't know if that quite answers your question directly, Councillor Reid, but it was a statement from the Minister that he or the government wished to see Scotland as this leading player in active travel nationally and internationally. And I thought it was worth enforcing for the members' interest that ambition from government and the opportunity that there is for us and local authorities in bidding and making sure we're working towards that.
Thanks. Could I possibly just come back very quickly? I'll be brief. You maybe tell members currently what is provided, percentage wise. If you're saying it's going up to 10%, you know, what's the current rate, so we can actually envisage what, you know, what could actually happen, what could transform. And also, I mean, at this level, I mean, when is the aim to get to the 10%? Is it going to be a sudden jump, or is it going to be a gradual increase? If it's a gradual increase, over how many years, etc., if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't have the figure to hand, but we can work that out and get it back to you. It has been gradually increasing over the last 2 to 3 years, but it is a fairly steep rise over the next couple of years. From memory, I think it's by 2025, it will be 10% of the transport budget.
If you don't mind, if you could email that, I'd be really interested.
Yeah,
thank you.
We'll get a response to that, and we'll put it around all the members and substitutes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Isabel Davison.
You know, when you've got a sticky button. I think that was really interesting, Glenn's question about active travel and increasing the budgets into it, because it's something that shouldn't be happening in isolation. It has to go along with place planning and local development plans, and be properly integrated in areas, especially in the more rural areas. Cities maybe a little, possibly slightly more straightforward, because you've got shorter distances between locations that people might want to travel to, but in rural areas, it really has to be, there has to be a holistic approach to it. And I don't think we've got that right. I mean, Colin maybe wants to speak about that because that's his particular interest. But I don't think we are doing the proper place planning at the moment to have active travel working well. So it's something maybe we need to do a bit of work on.
Okay, would Colin like to come back on that?
No, I totally agree, Isabel. I think we as an area, and actually locally and nationally, we're still very disconnected on what we do with active travel compared with developments in towns and other roads that we've got in, and it's been like that for years. However, having said that, I think there is more discussion about it. The new corridors that have been consulted on recently are an example of that. So there is more discussion on it. Hopefully, it becomes action. But yeah, I think you're right. The thing about the distances over the last sort of 5 years have actually become shorter with the uptake on e-bikes. You know, where previously routes, say, like from R1 from Ellen to Aberdeen, would be seen as a kind of serious cyclist routes. Actually, with an e-bike, it becomes quite easy to do that distance. Okay, it still takes an hour or so, or an hour or so, but on an e-bike, it's a lot easier to do. It's not so much the preserve of the serious cycle. So yeah, you're right. There's that development needs to happen, and needs to happen with any other new housing estates, etc., is where the active travel goes through. But I perceive it's getting better with more push from local and from national government.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Maggie Buckle.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, NPF 4, National Planning Framework 4, also includes the concept of 20-minute neighbourhoods. And whilst I totally get that there are pros and cons of 20-minute neighbourhoods, and they're not necessarily going to work in rural areas, I think once that becomes something that, if that becomes something that planning authorities have to take on board, then that should also help promote the kinds of things that we're looking for, and a bit more active travel just by making things closer together. But yeah, I think there's quite a long way to go with 20-minute neighbourhoods. That might be an interesting idea for a presentation sometime, Rab, in the future.
Thank you. And Councillor Sandra MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Just to, I was going to mention the 20-minute neighbourhoods, but I think also it just to perhaps emphasise that it is also about walking and active travel and not just wheeling or cycling. And I think that you know, is an important thing to emphasise. I came very late to the meeting on Monday, caught the end of the speakers and Q&A, and it was a lively meeting around the index, and I think you know, that Nestrans was absolutely central to that coming to Aberdeen, and so thanks to officers for the work that went into getting that index on the radar and getting that there. And I suppose my question, Rab, is really around. It was something I think it was Glenn that mentioned, or maybe it's yourself, Colin, about e-bikes. And I noticed in the index that the Aberdeen cycle scheme was due in fairly soon, and it was just maybe to get an update, because I didn't particularly, well, it kind of there's bits of it in various papers, but I just thought it might be useful to give an update from Aberdeen City Council of where we are in that.
Thanks, Chair. If I may, David Dunn is with us from Aberdeen City Council. I see he's helpfully put his hand up, so David, probably the best person to give an update on progress on that.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so work has been underway on the cycle scheme within the city for quite some time now. The Suez Canal got in the way, COVID got in the way, getting bikes from China has gotten in the way. We are told that progress is imminent, and a lot of work has been done behind the scenes in terms of getting both locations and I'm going to say staffing and so forth into place. fundamentally, I think we are going to have to make a call on it at some stage in the very near future as to do we continue with the proposed operator. Our wish would be to do so, but clearly we need to see more progress, particularly given, I'm going to say, the take up in cycling that we saw during COVID. So we do need to try and capitalise on that as best we can.
Okay, thank you. Doesn't look like there's any other questions, so we can go to the board to note the progress on liaison arrangements as the paper, and we will move on to the next item, which is 4.2, Nestrans Code of Conduct. Over to Rab.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, item 4.2, page 119 is the Nestrans Code of Conduct. We are required to submit a code of conduct to Transport Scotland and put it on our website for public to be able to have a look at it. I must first of all apologise that there were 3 papers. This is the first of them, to which we thought, for ease of members seeing proposed changes to previously approved documents, that we would use track changes within the appendices so that it would be easy to pick out what the suggested changes were. The programme that we use, which puts papers into your entries, automatically accepted all the track changes. So you ended up with just a clean version, i.e. with all the changes already accepted. So the second circulation which came out did include the track changes so that you can easily pick up where there are suggested amendments to the previous code. In this case, actually, to changes to a model code which has been prepared centrally and passed to all public bodies. So members will need to have a look through that and will be asked to complete a register of interests. So you can expect something from us in coming weeks, and just to make you aware of the limitations in terms of the normal, really acceptable things in terms of what you can and can't accept representing Nestrans. So the board are asked to adopt the code as appended and consider the need, whether you feel there's any need for further discussion or training, or whether to go into more detail about that. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Councillor Sandra MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was going to ask Rab, and at 3.20, it suggests that we as members advise the Chair and Director if we're offered anything as a gift. And that did, I mean, I wondered why we'd put in the Chair, if I'll be honest, as a past Chair. And I personally think it would be enough to advise the Director, but I just wanted to hear from yourself why you put that in. But I mean, I'm not, you know, it's not, I'm not going to die in a ditch over any of it, but it did seem odd to tell the Chair.
Yeah, it's entirely taken from the model code, Councillor MacDonald. So that's the suggestion, is that the Chair and lead officer should be made aware of any offers of that nature. I'm not going to die in a ditch over it either. In fact, I can't really recall many instances where it even came up, but you know, we can work around that one if you feel that that's worth an amendment.
I would like to just suggest that we tell the Director if there's anything, and if the Director feels that they need to pull in the chair for any reason, that might be sensible, but I'm not sure why we would do that. I don't get it.
As the chair, I'll be like, I can understand what you're saying. I'll be quite happy just for it to go to the RAB. If he feels that if anything comes up where he needs to tell me, I'm sure he will. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that chair, and with a proviso that if there was anything I was uncertain about, I could speak to yourself or vice chairs or yeah, do it if the circumstances arise. Yeah.
Particularly if it's the chair that has a something that they want to declare, I suppose.
Okay, Councillor Michael Hutchinson.
Yeah, so I was just I'm seeing a mention of registers of interest, and I see it in the document as well. Just obviously as councillors, we already have one through the council. Are we going to have to duplicate that separate one for Nestrans, or can we simply link to the existing one we have as elected members? Because I can't see there being much additional, anything additional we'd have to add in for Nestrans. Just to check on that, sorry.
No, that's a really fair point. I certainly would be happy if it's already published as your council register, then we can link to that. Obviously, we do also have non-councillor members, although none of them are new to the board today. But yeah, I can speak to our office manager and just check whether that's possible without you doing additional work. If we can do that, yeah.
That'd be good, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ian Yule.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say I supported Sandra's suggestions, which I thought was eminently sensible.
Thank you. And back to Councillor Sandra MacDonald.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I tend to agree with Michael on linking. Except, I just wanted to ensure, Rab, that because sometimes there might be things, for example, as a city councillor that are in the Shire, but I don't know. I can't see why that would make a difference, because I think whatever it was, it would be with your councillor hat on that you would be putting it into your register of interest. But because it is a wider geographical area, you might want to double check that.
Yeah, thank you. We'll double check that and see if it can be linked or if we need anything additional. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That's no other hands up there. So we move to adopt points 1 and 2 on the paper, and we will move on to the next point, which is paper 4.3, risk register review. Rab.
Thanks, Chair. The next three, Jennifer Anderson will take us through. So if I can hand over to Jenny. Jenny, thanks.
Thanks, Rab, and good afternoon, everyone. I didn't introduce myself before, but I'm Jennifer Anderson, and I hold the post of Transport Executive for Programmes and Delivery at Nestrans. This report is also on the additional agenda circulation as it contains track changes, and it provides details on the review of the risk register that has been undertaken to ensure significant risks are identified, evaluated and controlled. The last review was carried out in April 2021, and the board instructed that this be repeated on an annual basis. As noted, a number of normal business risks are mitigated due to Nestrans having service level agreements with our constituent councils for ICT, finance, legal and personnel, and each authority already has risks management systems in place for these services. A review of the previous risk register has been undertaken and consideration given to any amendments or requirements for the inclusion of new risks. The cause and impact of risks thought relevant to Nestrans have been considered against how likely they are to happen and their impact to determine the inherent risk assessment score, and then any mitigating actions and the current progress against the risks are also presented and used to determine a residual risk assessment score. And a key to the scoring chart that was used is contained in Appendix 1. The revised risk register is presented for consideration in Appendix 2. It shows any amendments to the previous version and track changes to help identify what they are. And the scores have mostly stayed the same, with the exception of the risk of not having an approved regional transport strategy in place now being reduced, and the impact of an interruption due to the operation in Nestrans due to loss of lease has also been downgraded due to our experience of staff having been able to work from home during the pandemic without interruption to service. So the board has been asked to consider the risk register and approve its implementation, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions or to incorporate any changes or additions to the risk register that the board may wish to make. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. And can I have Councillor Michael Hutchinson?
Yep, thank you. So a couple questions. Just the first one, I think cost of inflation. So on page 152, risk 10, and I notice the cost of inflation impacting on deliveries being added in, and but it's not, doesn't seem to have any impact on the score at this point in time. Just looking ahead, because obviously some inflation figures are published a few months afterwards, because it takes time to kind of feed through to the ONS and then into the public domain. What kind of level of inflation would we be looking at for that risk score to go up, just to kind of maybe looking ahead, if that makes sense, just because what I'm hearing is what the actual inflation right now is maybe still significantly higher than maybe what's being quoted in the public domain for certain matters.
Yeah, it seems to be changing. We go like this, the scoring is very subjective, and it's that what tips us over into the next one. I don't know, Rab, if you would have thoughts on, should we increase the score?
Yeah, no, I think it's a difficult one to know exactly where we are. It's a judgment really on that. As you say, at what level does the price of tar macadam or the price of steel or whatever, or even the cost of getting work done, the wage inflation question. But we've certainly experienced over the last year or two an inflation in prices when we go out to tender for some contracts. I think it's important that we highlighted that it is a risk, but yeah, it's a really valid question. Should we have increased the score? Because I guess it's looking more likely that inflation is going to be a factor over the next 12 to 24 months than we possibly had thought of a year ago. But I'm quite happy to increase that score if you feel that should be. But the fact we've highlighted it, sometimes schemes can be reduced in their spec because it's budget led. In other times, if you're building a cycle bridge, there's no point building 3/4 of it. As an example, if the price goes up, then we would need to have a greater budget. So
I can maybe just keep an eye on for it going forward. It would just kind of it might be something that needs to look, or first schedule is always going to get looked at. Might be something that needs a bit more attention. The other question is just on page 154, and it's to do with the Supreme Court judgment from 2017, which is obviously the kind of highest one. I'm just kind of the judgments happen. I'm just kind of trying to get my head around at what point does it become something where the judgments happened and it's just become, instead of being a risk, it just becomes something that's happened. At what is that? Because I realise we can't just have that as kind of the maximum risk forever, because at some point it's going to be the case of it's just happened. When do we start moving beyond that? Is there still some rumblings from the Strategic Transport Fund that's still kind of in the system we need to deal with?
Sorry, this was 11. I was on additional circulation.
Apologies,
yes.
I am.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to find which one it is. Yes, since the STF has been quashed, we have been trying to have discussions with legal in Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire Council. Under our service level agreement, we get legal services from Aberdeen City Council, but I think there might be a conflict of interest of them advising Nestrans, because it is money that might have to be returned to the city if it's not returned to the developer. So we have had this on our reader for a while, and there is something that we're trying to get resolved and just get some advice. We might have to go externally for it, just as to at what point do we have to either take the decision that yes, we can now spend this money that was provided as an upfront payment on transport schemes, or do we return it to the councils for them to ring fence? So it's just getting that legal advice at the moment. It's something that's been on our to-do list for a while, but it's not just been the most urgent priority. But yeah, we have got it on our to-do list.
There's obviously the Supreme Court judgment's 2017 as well, so I'm guessing we've not taken any new money into that fund for about 5 years as well.
No,
no, so kind of it was just to kind of check what was happening with that, because
we've had a lot of money returned. The bulk of it has, but there is still about 400,000 associated. Tended to be with upfront payments. So the person that made the payment to Nestrans under a service level agreement may have sold it on as the land was developed. So we don't necessarily know who to return it to. So we do really need legal advice, but with the council's priorities and just the different organisations' interests, we've not had this one resolved, and it maybe has slipped down the agenda a wee bit, but it's something we've still to do.
Well, thank you very much for that. Cheers.
Okay, I don't get, is it Ian Ross? Are you coming back on that, or is something another area?
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Davidson might have been in front of me, but I'll just make my point briefly. Just a little bit of an expansion on risk number 11, which is a high risk category, about funds no longer being available for mitigation. Could either Jenny or Rob expand on that, please? Okay.
Do you want to fight me for it, Rob? This is again because the Strategic Transport Fund that we set up to try and deal with the mitigations, like the cumulative mitigation of a number of developments, because it was quashed. The schemes that were identified now no longer have funding from that source. There is mention of the government potentially having levies, but at the moment there is a risk in delivering it. And so the various mitigations that we're trying to do meantime are listed underneath.
And have there been any adverse effects that have so far come about?
I think with the impact,
at the risk category.
I think with the impact of COVID and then policy change towards more active travel, climate change, the policy agenda to mode shift, that there might not be as much impact as was previously forecast, under a road building agenda. So, it probably should be reviewed as to whether the cumulative impact is still as was predicted. It maybe isn't as onerous now as was thought at the time when it was first undertaken.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Isabel Davison.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was risk 14 on page 157, the one that's to do with infrastructure and IT services. And I just wonder how a lot of the actions there are quite old now, and I just wonder if that's been updated, and it doesn't really say anything in the mitigating actions about protection against cyber attacks or working from home and any risks connected to that. So I just wonder if it's up to date now, because it is obviously something that's very much in focus at the moment after the problems that SEPA have had, and certainly much in the public sphere about the risks for internet connections. So I wonder if there's an update on where this is at now.
We do get our IT services, we get different functions from different authorities. So our ICT comes from Aberdeen City Council under a service level agreement. So we do have the protection of the levels that they put in place and the firewalls that they have in place for their systems. Sorry, that's maybe not made implicit in the information in the risk register.
Okay, and then Councillor Sandra MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Mine too was on risk number 11, and really, following on from Michael and Ian, I think that's one that we should perhaps look at, not today necessarily, but have a look at again, because having been around for the last 5 years, I just don't think the impact is going to be quite as high as 4, and the likelihood is probably not going to be as high as 3, and of course, or even the the inherent risk might actually have reduced as well. So I think that's one to have a look at, Jenny and Rab, and maybe come back to the board in the meantime. But if not, I guess we're not seeing this again until what, another year? Would that be correct?
Yeah.
But I think it would be worth looking at and changing.
So would it be worthwhile coming back a specific report on the Strategic Transport Fund itself and mention the risk scoring associated with it, or just the risk registered report again?
No, I think it would be, I think, it did come up in the budget papers that we looked at earlier, and it's something that crops up every now and again, as we know, for board, and it's quite difficult for some new members particularly to get their heads around, and I think it would just be very useful either as part of induction and training, or if you want to do some sort of email, or service, not service update with council speak, but just an update to members to explain. I see David's got his hand up.
Yes, David.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, Councillor MacDonald, just with my planning hat on, I would sort of probably express a little bit of caution in this area that the sort of risk that we're talking about is measured in terms of decades rather than in terms of years. So if you take, for example, the Countess Wells development, or the Granham development, and I'm only naming city ones just as a city employee, but there are several within Aberdeenshire as well. We are talking about developments which will come forward over the next 10, 20, possibly more years. So I think it's a difficult one to sort of encapsulate, because I do fully accept that there's a policy landscape and a significant change in focus around transport and where we should be investing our transport. So, for example, even if we had secured all of the contributions through the STF, the Strategic Transport Fund, I think the question would now be asked, and it would be a valid question: should we be spending it on the things that we identified 15 years ago in terms of junction improvements and new roads and so on and so forth? So I'd be very happy to work with Nestrans, as I'm sure my colleagues in Aberdeenshire would be, to see if we can sort of crystallise this a little bit more, because we do get regular, and we are having regular conversations with developers who are asking the same questions. Is the infrastructure that was requested or was expected at the time, is that still relevant? And I think it is something we're trying to explore.
That's very helpful, and it again, that was a bit of learning for me, so thank you for that.
No problem. Okay, that's no other questions. So if we can go to the recommendation that the board considers the attached risk register and approve its implementations, but maybe add the bit on about maybe Rab can come back on the 2 points what were picked up on that and inflation.
Yeah, happy to have another look at those two and see if we can have some actions to do, as Councillor MacDonald said, not necessarily waiting a year, but actually to progress them and report back to board on progress.
That would be great. And if Jennifer can move on to the next paper.
Thank you, Chair. This report is the last of the ones on the additional agenda circulation, and it relates to the review of Code of Corporate Governance for Nestrans. The last review was reported to the board in December 2020, but the action plan within the audited accounts that was reported last September stated that a further review should be undertaken in 21-22, and this has been postponed slightly until after the local government elections, so it could be considered by the new board. Reviews considered the extent to which the partnership already complies with the principles of good governance as set out within the SIPFA and SOLACE Delivering Good Governance and Local Government Framework. And the revised code is shown in Appendix 1 with amendments to the previous code, again shown in track changes so they can easily be identified. There are very little revisions proposed other than inserting the link to the new code of conduct that was the earlier item on the agenda that Rab introduced. Once this has been published on the Nestrans website, we would insert the link to it here in the code that will also be published. The previous report on annual risk register review that you've just heard also addresses the commitment within the code to maintain a risk management system, and the board are advised that service level agreements with Aberdeenshire Council for financial services and for personnel services that are both referenced within the code, they're currently in the process of being reviewed, but it is the intention that they'd both be extended for a further 3 years. In addition to reviewing the code, Nestrans will continue to be required to report a governance statement on an annual basis regarding the extent to which we've complied with our code and how the effectiveness of governance arrangements have been monitored throughout the year, along with any planned changes in the coming period. And it's suggested that this continues to be done as part of the annual accounts. So the board are therefore asked to agree the recommendations within the report. I'm happy to take any questions again. Thank you.
Councillor Crawley, you've just been on mute for the last couple of minutes. Sorry. If you could repeat what you just said. Thank you.
Sorry, there's been no questions on that paper, so if we can go to the board to recommend the 3 points, 1, 2 and 3 on the paper, and if that's happy, everyone happy with that, we'll move on. We'll move on to the next point, which I believe is still Jennifer.
Yes, apologies. Thank you, Chair. This report is back on the initial agenda circulation. It's to enable the board to consider the information that's proposed for publication in accordance with the Public Services Reform Scotland Act 2010. Although the various statements that are required have been included in the annual report in previous years, it was agreed that it would be better to report this separately at a later date when the information on financial transactions for the year were available. This is the benefit of allowing the annual report to be considered and published at an earlier date following the end of the financial year. And just as an aside, the design of last year's annual report has just been finished, and a link to the published document on the Nestrans website will be circulated by email to board members in the next few days, hopefully. Now the financial transactions for the year are confirmed. The statement of expenditure for stipulated matters has been prepared and is shown in Appendix 1. It contains all expenditure under the headings Public Relations, which includes promotions, external consultancy and payments to an individual payee that have a combined total in excess of £25,000. And there were no expenditure on overseas travel or hospitality and entertainment last year, and no members or employees received remuneration in excess of £150,000. Appendix 2 shows a statement prepared on steps taken by Nestrans and the exercise of its functions to promote and increase sustainable growth, which notes that Nestrans' primary function is to produce and implement a regional transport strategy. So details are therefore given on the development and adoption last year of the new strategy to 2040 and the progress by Nestrans during 21-22 against the various policies and actions within the RTS, and a list of projects that Nestrans provided funding towards. This is similar to a lot of the information in the annual report, but it's more concise and it purely relates to the actions undertaken or funded by Nestrans. So it's a benefit in having them separately reported, because we can't just make a reference to the annual report, we have to publish this statement as well. Appendix 3 shows the statement on improving efficiency, effectiveness and economy. It highlights the shared services and shared working practices adopted to achieve efficiency and effectiveness benefits, along with attracted funding and cost savings achieved. It also gives details on the procurement activity using Scotland Excel framework, which is a compliant, best value and efficient method of procuring technical services. These statements are required to be published as soon as possible after the end of the financial year, and the board is therefore asked to approve publication on the Nestrans website of this information. And I'm happy to try and answer any questions on the information presented within the report or any of the statements. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Glenn Reid.
Yeah, thanks for the report and thanks, Chair, for this. I don't know if this is these questions are best for yourself or whether maybe for Rab. Again, new member, so I'm not really too sure the procedures here. But on page 174, this is obviously the stuff that's going to go in the public domain. It's prompted a few questions for myself. So under achievements, Nestrans funded temporary signs for Ride the North. It says that an online survey was conducted. I know of these signs. I spoke to our own council officers about them because they were temporary. They basically highlighted where great routes around the Shire and Moray, etc. But I've never been able to see any evidence or any results from the survey. So is that available to members? On page 176, maximising the benefit of park and ride. Yep, I'm all for getting people out of cars and onto public transport, etc. But it's proposing new ones for Crathis and Old Meldrum. But have Nestrans ever done an analysis of the ones that we have already? I know some work very well, but we also have the one at Craveston that every time I go past it, it is, well, basically it's empty all the time. So as a new member, if we've got that kind of analysis, I would like to see that. And last but not least, page 178, ready to go. There's an evaluation coming out on that. It seems to be a very good service out here in the Shire. Can you tell me when we expect to see that evaluation? Thank you. Sorry for all the questions.
Jenny, I don't know if you want to take any of these, but I'm happy to come in if I can. Because the results of the survey of the temporary quiet cycle routes, I believe was reported to board. Certainly I've seen some analysis of the survey that was done, and we can circulate a link to that after the meeting. There is a report on making a more permanent sort of follow on from that, which we'll come on to at item 6.1. So that was such a success last summer that we're now talking about making a permanent scheme, and we'll discuss that under 6.1. Benefits of park and ride. Yeah, probably there's a need for a report, and I'm happy to bring one to a future meeting. We have reported it in the past, and we do annual spot checks of park and ride, both bus and rail, and we do have some data that we can have a look into, but probably a fuller report to a future meeting would be worthwhile on that one. And the third one, ready to go. I think there is a draft report looking at the success of that as a demand responsive transport in the Inverurie area. Ewan Wallace is on a call and might want to jump in and support me on this one. We've seen the draft report. It would be an intention to bring a report back to the board once we've seen the final report and once it's been reported to Aberdeenshire, who were the primary funding and authorising group. So I see a hand up. It's maybe Ewan.
Yes, Paul.
Hi, Chair. Ewan Wallace here. I think actually Paul Finch put his hand up, so I think you're bringing him in. He's probably closer to the precise timescale for signing off of the evaluation report. So if Paul wants to come in on that one.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit slow on my mute button there. The draft report has been prepared, and there's just the finalisation between the consultants and the officers preparing it. So I'm anticipating that final report to be available to be considered by probably both the Infrastructure Services Committee at Aberdeenshire Council and also Nestrans, probably after the summer. So it is in hand, it is almost there, and I think it's just a case of getting the final executive summary agreed. But it is still at that stage of it's between the work from the consultants isn't quite signed off yet.
Thanks. If I could just quickly come back in. Yeah, thanks very much for that, guys. I think a report on the analysis of the parking rights would be really good, because it's more the point of looking at what we're doing right in some of them, that they're so busy and they're doing, they're going really well, and why are other ones just not. So yeah, I think we'd all benefit from getting that kind of report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we have Councillor Sandra MacDonald?
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a bit of a picky one. I just wondered why, when we're publishing this, that some of it is in upper and lower and some of it's in shouty capitals, which I always tend to think of as being acronyms and so on. And I just thought it might look a little bit better if we had some consistency there, but that's just a picky comment.
Okay, I'll apologise. It's probably just my formatting. If it's up overwritten other ones, I'll check that for consistency.
Okay. Oh, so, no, sorry, the hand's gone down. Okay, that's that. I'll take. We can move the ball to approve the publication on that one, and we will move on to 5.1. And I'll pass you over to Rab.
Thanks, Chair. I've got Kirsty Chalmers with us, who tends to lead on Bus Partnership Fund and bus matters, as well as doing a lot of the strategy work in the past. So introduce Kirsty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rab has just covered my role within Nestrans, so that's fine. This paper is to provide an update to the board on the Bus Partnership Fund suite of projects, and in particular the work on Aberdeen Rapid Transit. Aberdeen Rapid Transit is, as a lot of you will probably know, is a flagship project of the newly adopted regional transport strategy. It's a proposal for a transformational bus rapid transit system to enhance public transport in the northeast, to work towards achieving some of those ambitious mode shift targets that we've got within the strategy, and to contribute to wider revitalisation, net zero ambitions of the region. The North East Bus Alliance was successful in its bid to the Bus Partnership Fund, which is run by Transport Scotland, and that bid was founded very much on that vision for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, and I've included within the report a link to the vision document that was prepared as part of that bidding process. So work to deliver this funding award is now well underway, and I've set out how that is split up, but there's effectively £10 million awarded for South College Street works, which is enabling bus priority within the city. There's a suite of multimodal corridor studies, which are developing options for the bus priority, on which the rapid transit system will depend. And there is also funding within that for the sort of appraisal and business case development of options for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, looking very much at what it would look like, how it would be operated, where it would go, and whether there's a business case for it. And then also within that funding award, there's 630,000 for communications and engagement and management to support the delivery. The purpose of the comms and engagement really is to sort of raise the profile of that vision for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, sort of to consult and engage with the public and stakeholders, and sort of trying to generate support for that vision and identify risks as we're moving through the various stages of the work. So I've provided within the report, I've provided a summary against each of those work streams. The South College Street multimodal corridor studies have been led by Aberdeen City Council, but Nestrans is leading on the work for the Aberdeen Rapid Transit work and the comms and engagement work streams. So there's a bit more detail on the ART work. At the last board meeting, we've got Stantec, consultant Stantec, been commissioned to assist us with that. They actually did a presentation at the last board meeting, which was recorded, and at the last board meeting the Case for Change report was approved and is available on the website, and that very much goes through that. The case for developing ART sets out the objectives, which I've summarised there. And the work at the moment is currently ongoing to finalise the preliminary options appraisal, which assesses really at a high level 5 broad approaches which could be adopted to deliver the ART concept, and that's looking really at the form of the network, so infrastructure, network and services, and also the deliverability and regulatory framework options, and that sort of looks at whether that might be bus service improvement partnerships or franchise agreements. So we're currently working through that with the consultants, with a draft report currently being reviewed by the client team, so we'll be hopeful to bring that back to the next board meeting. And the funding that we've been awarded through the Bus Partnership Fund will take us through to detailed options appraisal and outline business case development. So it's a process that we're continuing on. I've highlighted within the report the opportunity to learn from other bus rapid transit schemes. Back in early 2020, we had planned a site visit to Belfast to learn more about the Belfast Glider bus rapid transit system, which is in operation there. That didn't happen due to lockdown restrictions, so that visit never took place, although we did in its place have a presentation from a representative from Belfast, did a virtual presentation to the board. But it's felt, you know, as we're coming out of lockdown, that a site visit would however still be beneficial. And we've proposed within the report that officers organise for a delegation, you know, subject to approval, which would include a representative from the board to perhaps visit Belfast. So there's a recommendation within the report relating to that. During the ART work as well, we've also done quite a few, you know, held discussions with other BRT systems that are being developed or in operation, specifically the Birmingham Sprint network and also Bristol Metro Bus. And these have been really useful initial discussions with officers that are involved in developing schemes and operating schemes at the moment. And so it's proposed that, you know, we explore those contacts further and look for opportunities for greater engagement with the teams in Birmingham and Bristol to understand more about their schemes, how they're being developed, and, you know, including the potential for site visits and face-to-face meetings as we progress. There's an awful lot, I think, to be learned from the various schemes, particularly the ones that are in England, which have maybe a similar operating regulatory framework as compared to Belfast. There's an update as well around the stakeholder engagement, marketing and comms support, which Nestrans are also leading this strand of work. There's funding allocated through the bus partnership, and we have appointed consultants Jacobs in partnership with Social Marketing Gateway to develop and deliver a wide-reaching stakeholder engagement plan to support the ART from vision through to, you know, development and of the scheme. This will include, and I've listed the intended outcomes of that work, and the focus of the work at the moment is very much looking on those short-term priorities for engagement, and developing the sort of tools that we might use as we're progressing through that engagement, so sort of website development and some branding, but also market research to understand public perceptions and public attitudes. A key part of that short-term priority would be engagement with elected members, to discuss in more detail the vision for ART and enable a more detailed discussion. And we're proposing an elected members briefing around about September, probably after the summer, which would give a bit of time for the options appraisal work to progress a little bit further and really give the opportunity, as I say, to inform around the study, the development, to engage and allow input from members in a bit more detail. So there's a recommendation related to that as well. So yeah, moving on to the recommendations, there's 4 recommendations really: to note the progress against each of the BPF projects, agree a delegation to include representation from the board to visit Belfast to learn more about the glider, and to instruct officers to arrange this. We're thinking around about autumn 2022 would be an appropriate time. Number 3, to agree officers seek opportunities for greater engagement with the teams in Birmingham and Bristol, including potential for site visits and face-to-face meetings, and to note the progress under the engagement, marketing and comms, including proposals for a members briefing on ART in September 2022 following the summer recess. And I'm happy to take any questions on any of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Councillor Glenn Reid.
Yeah, thanks very much for this again. Very interesting. Again, new member, so a bit late to the party with this one. Aberdeen Rapid Transmit. I mean, obviously the clue is in the name, Rapid. But for the benefit of members, can you maybe illustrate how this should, how this will be transformational? So, e.g., Aberdeen city centre to maybe Peterhead, Aberdeen to back. What are we looking at as far as the reduction in times, where we are just now and where we actually look to be, please?
Yes, well, I mean, the sort of definition in short, a bus rapid transit system should deliver high segregation to enable fast and consistent journey times that are competitive with the car. Well, fast services, frequent services. So really you're looking for sort of turn up and go frequency, and high capacity. So you're enabling large volumes of people to travel. The ART, as outlined in the regional transport strategy, our vision for an ART network at the moment is really to be anchored by the park and ride sites. It very much links into the question that you had earlier around about use of park and rides, and I think it very much making this sort of it's a regional proposal, allowing people from Aberdeenshire to travel in park and ride and access a fast, frequent, reliable service. So it's founded on the principles of dedicated bus priority probably from the park and ride into the city centre, but that is along the key radial corridors. But that is something that the study that's ongoing is looking at, those optimum routing options, where it terminates, so that's something that's still very much being looked at. But that's the foundation, the sort of founding principles, I guess, of a BRT system, and specifically for one for the Northeast, looking at I think 4 key radial corridors from Kingswell, West Hill, Kingswells into the city, Craveston into the city, Ellen, Bridge of Dawn into the city, and from the south, Portlethen. Those would be the park and rides, although the multimodal corridor studies are looking at infrastructure extending out to Ellen, West Hill, and Inverurie. I'm getting my geographies all mixed up, but yeah, that's the founding sort of principles, I guess, of what the vision for ART as it stands at the moment.
If I could add, sorry, just to say, Kirsty hasn't mentioned, but there is a link to a short vision document on page 193 of the board papers. So I appreciate we gave you over 200 pages to read, and probably links to even more papers weren't uppermost, but the link on page 193 is a good short summary with visuals about the vision for ART. So I could maybe recommend that one, if I may.
Okay, thank you, Rab. I'd like to just go back to Kirsty on just one point. I mean, with these fast links, are you in close contact now with major employers just to see what rate they will be people will be going back into the office?
It's not something we've done at the moment, but obviously that sort of post-COVID travel patterns is something that would have to be reflected within the appraisal and business case work. You're looking at likely demand, and also through that kind of marketing and communications, it's our intention to really engage with business organisations and employers, I guess, along those corridors. There'll also be some consultation that's going on through the multimodal corridor studies, but I think, yes, those sort of changes in travel patterns is something that would have to be taken account in through that business case development. So it's not something we've done at the moment, but something we're conscious of.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sandra McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question on page 194 under the work that Transport Scotland is doing or the discussions that have already been had with Transport Scotland about separating out those 2 bits of work on the Stonehaven to Aberdeen link. So maybe, just asking when you expect to hear whether there will be the opportunity to separate out those 2 bits of work, which did make sense to me. I also, on the representative of the Nestrans Board, absolutely, would support somebody going to Belfast. It's not likely to be me, but if I can squeeze into your suitcase, I would definitely be there. It was really just to ask whether, when you're looking at doing that trip, if there was an opportunity, and I absolutely get the public person. I'm not suggesting that we have more than one representative. But if there was an opportunity that any other members of the board who were interested in going along and paying for themselves, for example, I don't know if that even can be done under insurance or anything else, but you know, if that could be looked into, I would be grateful, because I think that would be good. And my last point really is just a comment, and I think you know, given that Councillor Reid you know, maybe wasn't so aware of this, it just highlights to me how important that comms piece of this work is, and I know that it's at the heart of everything that Nestrans are doing, but I think it is going to be so important to us that we get that expert advice, and we get that that comms piece absolutely right, because I think that, as we heard when we had the presentation, I can't remember the guy's name, but from Belfast, that was really what, you know, what swung it in Belfast. So I think, you know, getting that right is absolutely key.
Just in response to the question on the Stonehaven one, that there is a proposal with Transport Scotland, I believe, a sort of paper setting out where we are and what we're hoping to do is sitting with Transport Scotland. So I think we're still waiting on a response for them, but I think it's probably getting to the point where we might want to chase that up. So we will take that back.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Isabel Davison.
Thanks very much. It's really interesting to hear all the work that's happening. And I wondered, you know, on page 197, it speaks about engaging with and briefing elected members. What does that mean? We have area committees that are very interested in their areas, you know, in Harbour, and we don't really get much information on this work that's going on, other than the same as the public get. And I wonder if you would, we would certainly welcome you along to our areas to come and talk to us more about what's happening and engage more fully with us, so that we are up to speed and we can support the work that Nestrans does that way.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're quite conscious of. A lot of the sort of communication, I guess, it's because it's a lot of the roots would be in the city, but we're very keen to engage with members in Aberdeenshire, because, you know, there's significant impact and benefit, I think, as well from Aberdeenshire residents. A members briefing, what we were proposing would be either virtual or in person, I think, still to be determined, but that we would invite all elected members across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire to that, precisely for that reason, so that we can tell people more about the ART and what we're hoping to achieve, and try and encourage engagement from that perspective.
So, sorry, can I come back? So that means that you want to have, what, 160 people all at one time? Is it 140 or something?
Yeah, and I think we've done virtual briefings in the past, so I think we maybe need to still think about the format of that, but we are keen to engage with all elected members or give them the opportunity to come to attend. But I'm open to suggestions as well, or whether there's alternative ways of doing that.
Yeah, but I could suggest alternative ways of doing that.
Okay.
Oh, one hand's just gone down. So, before we go to the recommendations, the only one I would like to sort of to get some clarification from, and I know we're saying a delegation going to Belfast. I mean, that obviously with costs, I think I'd take it's hopefully it will only be a very small delegation going.
Yes, I think it would be a selected group of some officers and member of the Nestrans Board. Rab, I don't know if you had any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's scalable. I think we would need to look into opportunities and what's possible. Speak to our contact in Belfast, who was a Mr. Clive Robinson. The presentation that he did to a previous Nestrans Board is available on our website. I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head. I think probably about summer of 2020. Yeah. An excellent presentation. We had, as Kirsty mentioned, we had talked about doing a delegation prior to COVID impacting upon us. We were looking at about 10 people at that time. had it costed and approved budget for it. I think from memory it was about 5 officers and 5 members of the board. I think we can do it slightly smaller than that, but I'd be delighted if more members were able to come, because I think, having been in Belfast on my own budget, Sandra, I did find it fascinating, and I've been banging on about it for 3 years, I think, since. It blew me away, I think was the phrase I used, in terms of how efficient and how effective the glider system is in Belfast. And I think the more people who see it, the more benefit and the more advocates we would have for the scheme. But yeah, there's an opportunity for a small group to go, and for them then to become advocates and sell it to other members and other colleagues and contacts. So, yeah, we'll have a look at that though, Councillor Crawley, and I'll come back and speak to you when we've maybe got a proposal, maybe subject to the chair and vice chair's agreement or something of that nature, before we go down into any detail about actually booking things.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks very much. Right, there's no more questions on that, so we'll move that we recommend the 4 points on this paper, and we will then move over to the next one, which is 5.2, and if I can get it on my system.
And Paul Finch, who's the transport manager, will take us through 5.2 on City Region deal. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rab.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rab. As Rab's introduced me, my name is Paul Finch, Strategy Manager at Nestrans, supporting Rab and the team. Part of my work is to support also the City Region deal on the transport aspects of that. And although there is some crossover between the Nestrans Board and the City Region Board, sometimes in the City Region Deal Board, there are transport aspects which are discussed. And it's also important, I think, to bring an update to the Nestrans Board, just to make sure that almost like the regional committees looking at this are aware of the developments that are happening on both sides of the equation. So my report in 5.2 is actually very similar to a report that I brought to this committee in May last year. So some members may recognise a bit of repetition, but I thought it was important for any potential new members just to provide a bit of background about how the City Region Deal and the City Region Deal Committee and the governance works. The City Region Deal was signed off in 2016. There are a range of economic development projects, and there are 2 specific transport projects sitting within the City Region Deal. One is a programme which is now being led by City Council, looking to improve access arrangements at Aberdeen South Harbour, and also a fund to look at strategic transport appraisal, which really is about strategy and scheme development more than actual implementation. It's also worth noting that 2 further transport projects were announced alongside the City Region Deal agreement, but don't actually form part of it. And that is a commitment to improve journey times on the rail network between Aberdeen and the Central Belt, and also implementation of a grade separated junction at Lawrencekirk. Although there is no direct governance of the City Region Deal on those 2 projects, Transport Scotland bring updates to that board every 6 months on the progress of those projects, and are often interrogated on them as it goes forward. The main update is probably on the strategic transport appraisal, but I will quickly run through some of the other projects again for that awareness. The first one is the external links to Aberdeen South Harbour. Obviously, South Harbour will be opening up or beginning to open up, I believe, next year, beginning its operational phase. There was a project to improve access to that. After an option appraisal process, there was a diagram that's provided on page 200 of the route that's now been progressed, and I understand that design consultants for that have now been selected and are going through that commissioning phase, and they've been tasked with identifying an accelerated programme for delivery of that route. The strategic transport appraisal, we've had success in how that's helped us develop and approve our regional transport strategy, but also behind the scenes how that work has also helped us with our both local authorities, local development plans, and also the regional strategic development plan. Obviously, that's now been subsumed into the national planning framework. And also it's been helping us with a transport model, the ASAM 19 transport model, which helps us predict some of these influences on both the road and the public transport network. And so that will have a lot of relevance when we start to appraise some of the impacts of the Aberdeen Rapid Transit, for example. A couple of Fridays ago, I presented to the City Region Deal Board and they approved the following pieces of work to take forward for the next 4 years. That's further modelling work, particularly looking at where there's particular pressures on the network performance. And to a certain extent, that also does link into those residual impacts of developments post AWPR and the Strategic Development Fund, and see if we can identify where or if there are gaps and the most appropriate mitigations for those, which aren't necessarily around about road infrastructure. There was support for further development of the business case or updating of the information we've used for the previous work we did on the A90 North Corridor north of Ellen. Previous work had identified by Nestrans a very strong business case and benefits coming from improvements to the junctions, the roundabout junctions at Ellen, also the Tollefburn junction for a moderate sum of money to help assist reliability for freight, for example. And again, that's a trunk road, so it's a case of it's in the gift of Transport Scotland, although Nestrans and the City Region Deal partners have a role to make the case for that. And it also has particular relevance in terms of the recent Green Freeport bid, which obviously included Peterhead Port as well as Aberdeen Port. Out with that, obviously, Fraserburgh Port is also a user of that particular route as well, so it has multiple benefits in terms of that. The third element was to do some targeted work on Wellington Road corridor, particularly the junctions at the southern end at Hareness and Suterhead, where a stag progress, which was reported, I think in the autumn, identified some further work just to clarify the arrangements, and with the view that potentially that could also be included within the work that's been undertaken on the External Links project. A fourth element was around rail freight demand. We know that the improvements to the rail between Aberdeen and Central Belt will open up more freight paths between Aberdeen and Central Belt. They're currently constrained to about 4 paths a day. We understand that's going to open up the number of paths to about 10 a day. There's a strong policy context from the Scottish Government to produce and push rail freight because of the sustainability credentials. And I think it's time to have a look at that rail freight demand, but also the likely terminal for that is probably going to be south of Aberdeen Station because of some of the constraints getting freight trains through Aberdeen Station. And at the same time, there's also some master planning work being done at East Tullis, so it would appear to be appropriate to have a look at that particular aspect at this time. And we've also identified some small-scale intervention projects. One is around mobility hubs, which are small-scale interventions looking at how people can maximise interchange between sustainable modes. And also piloting demountable hydrogen fuelling hubs. Aberdeen City Council and the regional partners have invested highly in a hydrogen strategy. However, at the moment, the fuelling capabilities are limited to 2 locations in the city centre. And that limits the attractiveness of adopting pilot hydrogen vehicles if you're out with the city centre. There is a potential to identify sort of a hydrogen refueler out with there, perhaps into the Aberdeenshire area. As part of the Green Freeport bid, we floated that as an idea at Peterhead, so that, again, the benefits of hydrogen freight or the ability to pilot hydrogen freight vehicles are opened up to a wider spectrum of the North East economy, which I think is important and helps to cement the position of the North East economy as leading on that hydrogen front. So they're the 2 scopes of project which sit within the City Region Deal funding envelope. Just briefly, the other 2 projects that are reported separately, one is about the £200 million on Aberdeen to Central Belt improvements, and Transport Scotland, after a potentially slow start, now seem to be really getting their gear together and pushing on with the proposals and the design work for signalling improvements, the freight loops and the station track works, and they claim to continue to be on track to deliver those by 2026, which is the end of the city region deal period, and also the fact that this work is complementing the electrification work on that particular line as well. And then the second complementary project is Aberdeen to Lawrencekirk Junction upgrade. Despite early progress on that one, the progress seems to have stalled a little bit on that area because option work to overcome a weak bridge in the Oty Hill area, which would have provided access to a number of properties, seems to have got stuck up in the Transport Scotland sort of internal governance process. So we're very keen to re-engage with Transport Scotland and see how that is getting on, and how Nestrans and particularly Aberdeenshire Council can help facilitate progress on that over-needed and urgent piece of work on the trunk road south of Aberdeen. So really, this was just an overview and an update and a bit of background on how the city region deal works and some of the projects that Nestrans are involved with in that particular governance structure, but also just bringing it across to this board so that people have that awareness. And obviously, if there's any questions that can influence my work, then I can also take that into the work that we're progressing with partners. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Councillor John Cox.
Thank you, Paul, for that update. Rail freight is mentioned in a number of papers in today's agenda. So could I ask that a more detailed paper comes back to us in terms of, you mentioned some of the capacity issues, you mentioned opportunities south of Aberdeen, but I just wonder if there's any other locations to the north. Clearly, we're trying to encourage inward investment in transport, and logistic costs are a major factor whether companies will locate in the north when they've got high transport costs. So I see this as an opportunity. I appreciate the time today, and you did cover it quite well. I think maybe a bit more focus on what it would look like if we can deliver and enhance and develop that. And there's also, in the past, we've talked about marine traffic and the opportunities around that. But I would say that not in a combined report, but maybe a separate one, but focusing on the rail freight at the moment and those opportunities. I understand the constraints in the rail line, but now we need to start planning to shifting more stuff off the road in light of the transport costs, such like. So I don't know, Chair, if you would agree that a further report, a bit more detail in the opportunities comes forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Can I go back to Rab on that?
Yep, certainly a report back on rail freight is something that we could look into. Paul works through a freight forum, which we have across the northeast, which looks at all forms of freight, but rail freight would be a particular focus of that group. And we've also been involved in the national group, which goes under the grand title of Scot Flag, which is the Scottish Freight and Logistics Action Group. So we do look at freight both in a national and a regional perspective. And yeah, it's something a short paper would be quite worthwhile pulling together. Don't know if you want to add anything, Paul.
No, there's lots of issues around here, and it's just a case of we'll have a look at the various issues that are going on and make sure that we can bring a report which is of value to inform the board. It may not be the next board, it might be the one after, just as a couple of things might resolve. But yes, and certainly if we are committing to doing some rail freight demand work, then obviously it's timely that we can bring that to yourselves, both in terms of the context, but also subsequently the outcomes of that as well. I think rail freight is a key item on the policy agenda, particularly in the northeast, because of its relative location.
Thank you. The only other point I would say was it's nice to hear, Paul, that if we do get the free reports for Peterhead and Aberdeen, that we are looking at this hydrogen hub, for a better word, up in Peterhead, which will hopefully bring a lot more investment into that type of vehicles. At the moment, it's unviable, to be honest with you, for the distances. But that's that. Thank you very much. If there is no more questions, we'll make the recommendation of noting the progress being made on the transport elements of the Aberdeen City Region deal, and we will move on to 6.1 Active Travel Action Plan Update. I'll pass you over to Rab.
Thanks, Chair. Active Travel, we have both Kelly Wiltshire and John Barron do a lot of work on behalf of Nestrans on this subject. John is has been given a well-earned week's holiday and sent his apologies for today, but Kelly Wiltshire is going to introduce the paper. So if I can hand over to Kelly, thanks.
Thanks, Rab. Thank you, Chair. As Rab said, I'm Kelly Wiltshire. I'm one of the transport executives at Nestrans, and part of my remit covers active travel. So the purpose of this report is just to update the board on what is happening with active travel. We have an active travel action plan, which was first published in December 2014. We're currently in the process of reviewing and refreshing that plan, partly because we now have a new regional transport strategy, but also because the amount of funding that's coming into active travel, as Rab said earlier, is increasing rapidly. So it's only right that we revise our active travel action plan. As Rab also mentioned, the Sustrans Walking and Cycling Index for Aberdeen was published and launched in Aberdeen on Monday evening. Now, this is a survey of walking and cycling in Aberdeen. It has lots of case studies and also has a really wide-ranging survey. There was about 1,300 people in the Aberdeen area that were surveyed on their views on walking and cycling. So it's a really worthwhile piece of work. It's a really good baseline for us. It's certainly the biggest survey on active travel that we've had in the area, and it really gives us opportunities for how to encourage people to do more and what the barriers are as well. It's also, this report is to give the board an update on some additional funding that we've just recently received from Transport Scotland. We applied for £500,000 to deliver 5 further projects, and we found out at the end of April that we were successful in that application. So I'll just go through quickly what those 5 projects are. The first one here is about the Fermartin and Buchan Way bridge repair and replacement works. As many members will know, the Fermartin and Buchan Way is the old railway line that leads from Dice right up to the Buchan area, and some of the bridges on that route are very old, Victorian in fact, and are needing replaced. So this is part of a rolling project to actually replace some of these bridges to allow the Fermartin and Buchan Way to continue to be used, and also to become part of the national cycle network, which we're delighted about. So we've already installed 6, and there's plans in place for a further 5 to be installed in this financial year. We are also going to do an Aberdeenshire Core Path Network survey. This is very similar to a Core Path survey that we did in our last financial year in Aberdeen City, and it's basically going to look at all of the core paths right across the whole of Aberdeenshire, using the Paths for All Path Manager's Guide grading. We're going to be looking at where the sites are, what work they potentially need to do in terms of maintenance, signposting, seating, information boards and so on, and also any opportunities to improve them and potentially connect to other existing networks. So that is a really important ongoing piece of work that is looking at walking and cycling, horse riding, all sorts of things that people can do on core paths right across the Aberdeenshire area, and as I say, links into work that we've already done for the City Council area. It was mentioned earlier about this Quiet Roads cycle signing, the North East Cycle Network. that was led by Ride the North last year, and there was a survey done on it. We are now looking to seek to create a permanent signed network similar to the national cycle network, but to be much more locally focused and to enable and encourage and support more people to travel actively between the various towns and villages and communities across the northeast, but on quieter roads. So we're hoping that these signed routes will really help people to make choices around active travel, that they can travel but on quieter roads. And as I say, we did a temporary signing pilot last year, which was very successful. We had a good responses to the survey and have decided to make this a permanent network. So that will be getting rolled out over the next year or so as well. We have another project which is called the North East Scotland Bike Recycling and Reuse Project. As a lot of you will be aware, there's been a big rise in the number of people cycling, particularly as a result of the pandemic, and there has been a shortage in bicycles. With the cost of living crisis, a lot of people are actually struggling to afford to buy bikes as well. So this recycling project is actually designed to reuse bikes that are already existing, perhaps bikes that are needing repaired, or perhaps bikes that children have just grown out of and people don't need anymore, to actually be upcycled and given to other people either at reduced cost or free, so we can encourage more people to actually travel by bicycle. We have had a look at what is actually happening in the Aberdeen city and Aberdeenshire areas in terms of what is happening already in terms of bike recycling and bike reuse. And we are proposing to work with 3 organisations. One is Stella's Voice, which is based in Peterhead. One is Gordon Rural Action, based in Huntly, and the Dundee and Angus Cycle Hub. And these 3 organisations are already doing bike recycling and facilitation and training to encourage more people to cycle, and we're hoping to work with them to scale up their operations and to have a system in Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire where people can hand in bikes that they no longer need, or if they require a bike, that they're able to access a bike as well. This not only is good for active travel, but is also good for the environment and supportive of the circular economy, and will divert a significant amount of bikes to landfill or scrap. This also links with the Scottish Government's climate change plan and trying to encourage more people to use active travel. Linking into this project, we also have an adult cycle training project. As a lot of you will be aware, in schools there is the bikeability training, which is done for children. And if more children are going to be able to access a bike, we would also like adults to be able to be trained and have the opportunity for training or refresher training for bicycles, so they can go out with their children to cycle as a family as well. So we're looking to offer free bicycle training for adults across the Northeast, built on local success stories that are already happening with the Aberdeenshire Bothy, the Aberdeenshire Cycle Forum, and other groups that are already currently undertaking small-scale adult cycle training. But we're keen to, again, upscale this to allow anybody who would like to get adult cycle training in Aberdeen or Aberdeenshire to be able to access it. So our recommendations is to note the contents of the report and request officers to keep the board updated on the progress of these projects, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor John Cox.
Yeah, thank you. The Banff Active Travel Bridge is quite a strategic, important initiative that has been worked on for a number of years. I just don't see any reference to it in this this paper, and ask that any future reports does include that, because I am aware that there is work between Nestrans and the council in supporting this initiative. Thank you.
That's correct, and we did actually put a paper up on that project to the previous board, but again we can send out that information and we'll update the board on the progress of that project as it's ongoing. But we have taken it to the board. I think it was actually in our April board, we did an update on that. But yes, happy to continue to update the board as we have more progress on that project.
Thank you. Councillor Isabel Davison.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kelly. Two questions. One is about the network of quiet northeast roads. Was that the ones with the little blue stickers then? So and that is that all that was on them with little blue stickers? Was that enough to?
Yeah, the signs were, as you say, quite small, and they tended to have arrows for directions and the name of the town and village that the route was taking you to. So yeah, they were quite small. We are looking to have more permanent signage in the future that perhaps is slightly bigger and obviously isn't just going to be stickers. It will be more like what you would get your normal tourist sort of signing. So yeah, we still haven't completely agreed what the signs are going to look like, but we're hoping to have something soon that we'll be able to share with the board.
That's great. I mean, a lot of those are still there, and you know,
yes.
I think people do still see them. Is there any consultation about where these routes would be or anything? And is there, you know, in Perthshire, if you go around Perthshire, there's lots of boards up saying quiet route, and it's for cyclists, horse riders, walkers, you know, and cars, multi-user routes, which is fantastic, you know, but we haven't got anything like that up here, and it's maximum 40 miles an hour, which is still quite fast. But anyway, if you've got, you do see a lot of people out using them, but and I guess that slows cars down too. So again, I'm back to this holistic approach. Do we need to look at the bigger picture rather than just having better cycle routes? It's better active travel routes, and looking at that holistic approach and working with the council to make sure that the speeds are right for those routes as well, and the locations are in the best place, because I'm not sure who or how the locations are decided. And I do get a lot of people getting in touch with me to ask for routes to be signposted as active travel routes and for vehicles to be slowed down. And, you know, it's very hard to make any progress with that from a councillor's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with everything you've said, and that certainly is the intention with this project, that it would be expanded and include further routes and potentially in the future lower speed limits and so on, obviously all subject to public consultation, but that certainly would be the intention, to have this network of quieter roads across the city and Aberdeenshire. It's certainly something, as you say, that other parts of the country have quite successfully, and would be keen to develop something. We're hoping that that is something that could perhaps be included as part of our ACTRAP refresh for that active travel action plan.
Thanks very much. I'm just aware that there doesn't seem, and from my point of view as a non-Nestrans, non-ISC member, there doesn't seem to be a lot of information flowing through Aberdeenshire Council, so we can work on that. That's fine.
Absolutely, that's hopefully something that we can improve.
And my other question is one that I've been involved with recently, and that was, and it's really completely out of your scope, is about electric bikes for Ukrainian refugees to be able to access workplaces.
Yeah, Stella's Voice, certainly as one of our potential partners in the bike recycling scheme, have already given some bicycles to refugees, and I think this is something that these partner organisations are certainly keen to do. We're certainly keen to include, you know, anybody who requires access to a bike to potentially be able to give that, whether they're, you know, a refugee or anybody, you know, seeking work or that requires a sort of reduced cost bike. That's certainly the sort of people that we would hope to be able to help with this scheme.
But they're mostly self-propelled bikes.
It really depends what is available, you know, in terms of the whole idea is recycled bikes. So it'll be bikes that are already existing. There will be some, you know, e-bikes coming through the system, but I suspect most of the bikes initially will probably be push pedal bikes, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Glenn Reid.
Yeah, thanks very much for this this paper. Councillor Davison, just to let you know, ISC at the start in Aberdeenshire, I think it was January, approved 3 routes in Aberdeenshire that are going to be trialled for quiet routes. We asked for them to be signed, but officers didn't really want the signage as far as like 40 miles per hour. But it's coming back to ISC, I think, next year, so you'll see it there. But anyway, that's not what I was on about. I've got a few questions and comments, if you don't mind. One, first of all, is the quiet road cycling signage. You partially answered it in saying that you think this will be done within a year or so. I'm really quite keen on dates. I mean, rather than like being, you know, I know it's slightly vague, but the idea is if we could possibly get this done before the summer next year, we can actually market this as there's a lot of visitors come all over the country for you know, for active travel, for cycling, leisure cycling, etc. And it'd be good if we had an aim to have it all in place by then. Is that something that'd be possible? I have other questions and comments though.
Yeah, absolutely. The condition of the grant is that we spend it this financial year. So we have to spend the money for the signing project this financial year. So that will be certainly getting the signs made and then obviously being actually implemented and put up around the Shire. I haven't got an exact date because it depends how busy the sign shop is and everything, but absolutely we need to spend this grant by the end of March 2023. So that is our aim, is to get it done. There might be a little bit of residue into the next financial year, but for the most part we would want the money spent and it implemented by the end of this financial year.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's just your comment of a year and so, which really threw me.
Yeah, I think it was just, we might get them purchased and bought and the vast majority up, but just knowing how busy some of the teams can be, we might not be able to get every single thing done this financial year, but certainly we would aim to get it done by the end of this financial year because that's when we need to get the money spent for.
Okay. Brilliant. The next one is a request. Obviously, we've identified in this meeting there's more and more money coming in for active travel and all that kind of stuff. And somebody mentioned about looking for projects, etc. You've touched on the Formartine and Buchan Way and the bridge replacement scheme, which is fantastic. But I'm aware of a lot of people who won't cycle on there because of the surface of it. It's a strategic route that goes all the way into Dice. Is it something that could be looked at as a future project for actually making that accessible to everybody, whether it be cycling, walking, wheelchairs, etc.? Make the route much more, well, make it level and remove some of the stones, etc. Make everybody accessible.
I believe we have got some funding coming through from Sustrans that actually we were just told in the last week or so, even since we've actually written this paper for that very purpose, to upgrade the Formartine and Buchan Way, because it is going to become part of the National Cycle Network. So Sustrans will be sort of taking over it, if you like. So yes, Rab or Jenny maybe could keep me right. I have a feeling that funding is about 375,000 and is around making it more accessible.
Yeah, there is funding, but it is a long-term plan. I think it's fair to say, Councillor Reid, that it's a significant investment, probably over a 10-year or longer period of time. We've prioritised the bridges because some of them were failing. There has been some resurfacing, particularly at the Dice end of the route, but we are looking at where we can improve that and upgrade it. I think in the Ellen area, there has been some resurfacing, including the major works on the viaduct over the River Ithen. So a major piece of work there, but it is a long-term ongoing programme. And what we didn't want to do was face a situation that 5 years from now, we needed to do everything. So what we're trying to do is have a rolling programme of improvements with prioritised schemes first. But certainly resurfacing is part of that, as is removing some of the barriers. So the old scheme, for example, had motorcycle restriction barriers, but actually they weren't suitable for some types of bikes, certainly not for cargo bikes or wheelchairs for that matter. And so we are looking at removing and replacing some of these access barriers as well.
Oh, that's all fantastic, guys. Thank you very much for that. The last one I've got for you, and it says it might be a slightly bit more work, etc. You touched on the fact that the last time the plan came out was 2014. I got elected in 2017. I've been monitoring this very carefully. I'm a huge advocate of active travel. Now, I was aware that the long-term strategic plan was for the strategic corridors in the Shire to go into the city, you know, so Inverurie, but effectively into Aberdeen, Ellon, and coming up from Stonehaven. Most of the reports we get back in Aberdeenshire Council anyway are, I don't want to say piecemeal, but it is lots of broken up little projects, etc. So it's all over the place. So I would, if it's at all possible, hopefully at the next meeting, I'd really welcome a report that would actually, it's more strategic. As somebody who's very keen on this, I struggle to work my way through and find where these corridors are supposed to go when they get into Aberdeen. So, you know, it's very obvious. Inverurie goes to Blackburn, and then it's over, you know, some point it goes over the tire bagger, and then it goes into Aberdeen. But where? How does it get into the centre? So I'd really welcome a report that broke down each of the strategic routes from the city to the Shire, with the smaller parts of the projects identified, the dates for completion, or even if these are estimated, but we do need to, I think we do need to have dates in there so the public can actually be aware of what we're doing, what we're working towards, etc. And an overall target date. As I said, I've struggled before, and if I'm struggling, the public are definitely struggling. They really have there's a lot of interest in this, and they've got a right to know what we're doing, how we're doing, and when we actually intend to get there eventually. Even if they're, you know, we're slightly late or whatever, just rough dates, so people we can actually talk to the public. We can say to them, look, this is what we're planning. The dates are key. I know there'll be variables included in there, such as maybe land ownership or whatever, but I do think that's achievable, and I really would welcome your opinion on that, whether we could get that at the next meeting and whether we could really, you know, have an overarching document coming to us.
Yes, I'm sure we can pull together a report on that and what information there is out there. I'm not sure if we'll have dates by the next meeting, but I can certainly aim for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, certainly reviewing the Active Travel Action Plan is a key piece of work. I'm not going to say we'll guarantee that it will be ready for the next meeting in September, but we can provide an update in September when we can do that, what the programme is for developing and delivering that.
Fantastic. I can just quickly come back. If we can't get the dates for the next one, could we have the dates for the one after that? I don't want to really put pressure on, etc. But people need to know, we need to know when we're talking to people what our plan is, and without the dates, you can't judge whether you're successful or anything at all. So we need that as a baseline, what we're actually aiming for.
Yep, we'll certainly do our best to get that done for you.
Okay, thank you. Now, Colin, been very patient.
Sorry, I can't get my mic off now. Yeah, just a couple of points. The recycling reuse scheme, the three groups that you're dealing with, is there also an opportunity to deal with smaller groups? I know in Ellen, the men's sheds here are doing a whole lot of recycling. So if there's anything that, you know, if there's spare bits, for instance, that are coming from any of these other ones, if you want some gears or something like that, with the Ellen's, other linkages that we could put for people to get spares or second-hand spares or bits of bikes that would help them out, because, like I say, there's a lot of smaller people, smaller groups doing this, as well as just these three areas to do on that. So that would be good to know who to get, at least to give the people there some contacts for that.
Yeah, I certainly think there is potential to make this much bigger over the next few years. This is £100,000 over this financial year. We were really keen to work with organisations that are pretty much already set up and are already doing it, but on a slightly smaller scale. They already have the links with the local authorities and with, you know, social work and education and so on, in terms of distributing help to people who need it. So we were really keen to work with organisations that could hit the ground running for this financial year. Again, because of the way our funding is, we've got to spend it this financial year. But absolutely, we are hoping that this project isn't just this 12 months. It will, you know, continue and become much bigger over the coming years. And absolutely, that is when we would be looking to work with lots of different other organisations, because we know there are loads of groups that are doing this on a very small scale. But what we were really keen to do this financial year was to work with these organisations that have already got those networks, already have trained Velotech bike mechanics working for them, that we can just upskill and, you know, get going and actually spend this money and show that the project can be viable, and then absolutely look to progress it in a much wider over the coming years. But certainly part of the project we'd be quite keen is to do this signposting to places like men's sheds and other smaller organisations, especially if we're potentially going to be overwhelmed.
Yeah. Okay. Second point was about the Ride the North things from last year, the small signs. So yeah, that was put together by the guy that runs the Ride the North Sportives very quickly last year. But there was two parts of it. There was the signs that were out on the road, and there was also a really good website that mapped out all these routes and everything, so that the permanent one's going to be very much the same, and a bit of work with the permanent one is also going to link into other tourist cycle tourism things, like the Aberdeenshire Ascents that has just been announced over the last few months, about the 10 climbs all over Aberdeenshire as part of it, cycle tourism, and the Northeast 250 route as well. So there is a bit of outside thinking around this about how we can tie in local tourist attractions as well as that. So it was a very quick bit of work last year that is going to be developed on, and I think hopefully we can do that within the year. I had the Aberdeenshire Ascents, the 10 climbs for that took 2.5 years to get the 20 signs. So I'm just saying it might take a bit longer than usual, but that's great. Yeah, that was my only point about tying in with the smaller recycling things as well. Thank you.
No, and thank you for that update, Colin. It's much appreciated. I know you've been involved in it.
Okay, that's all the questions for that. So the board will note the contents of the report and request officers to keep the board updated on the progress of the projects. I'll go to Rab now. I'm not sure if it's 7 part of 6.1, which is the Regional Transport Strategy Progress Report.
No, it's 7's the general update on progress on all of the various aspects of the RTS. I'll just quickly hand over to Jenny to do a quick introduction.
Thanks again. The progress report is a standing item on each board agenda, and it's provided for information and doesn't have a covering report, so it isn't normally introduced. But for the benefit of any new board members, it was thought that it might be helpful to give a very quick overview of the purpose of this item and how it's presented, but don't worry, I'm not going to go through all the pages of it. The progress report contains the 18 policy headings of the Regional Transport Strategy to 2040 and each of the actions within them, and a very short summary of the current status and planned progress of any projects being taken forward by Nestrans is given, along with updates, if we know them, on projects and action points that are being progressed and funded by others that relate to our regional transport strategy delivery. Some projects might contain elements that relate to a number of actions within the strategy. For example, the multimodal corridor studies may develop options that achieve aims within the active travel, bus, reducing emissions, road and freight headings, but updates are only included once under what's considered to be the most appropriate heading. And in the case of the multimodal studies, the updates provided within the bus actions heading, due to many of these studies being funded via the Bus Partnership Fund Award. So reference to this section is then given from any other related actions. And where funding is provided through the Nestrans budget, details are given on the allocated budget amount and the amount that's been invoiced to date this financial year. And this just provides the board with a bit greater detail on the delivery of individual projects being funded by Nestrans than's available within the summary of expenditure and the separate budget matters report that's also a standing item on the agenda. As some of the updates relate to work being undertaken at a national level, they're shown at the top of the progress report and give information on sort of overarching policies and project. However, should any individual national projects or elements of national policies relate directly to individual actions within the RTS, then they'll be shown against this item. And in order to help the board easily identify any updates since the previous progress report, all new information is shown in bold text. And any rows where there isn't an update, they're then shrunk in size to try to reduce the length of the overall report. So as a result, the full wording at each RTS action might not be shown if it's been shrunken down. And as it covers the entire RTS strategy, the progress report only gives a very brief update on latest progress. And if further details are given in a separate substantive report on the agenda, then a reference is made to this. But hopefully members find the progress report of interest and welcome the opportunity it gives to raise queries on any of the information that's provided. And I'm happy to try and answer any queries on the progress report, but information within it comes from a number of sources. So if myself or other Nestrans and council staff in attendance don't immediately have an answer, would normally look into this in more detail following the board and then send a response where we can by email to all members. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Colin.
Sorry, thanks very much, Chair. This is just a request for more details on one part of it. I happened to be logging into a Formartine Area Committee meeting yesterday, and there was a request for more information about page 213 about the A92 Balmedy to Black Dog shared use path and onward from Black Dog to Mercar. I know that crosses from Shire into the city, but if we could have a sort of one-page update of, as Glenn says, sort of timings on when this is going to be developed and how, because it's been on the agenda for quite a while now, and you know, other councillors are asking questions about that.
Okay. Yeah, the updates that I've provided here, it's just this short summary that I get from the council staff that are leading on it. But yeah, I'll try and get a bit more information and send that on.
Okay, no other questions. So we're the recommendations of A, B, and C on this will be noted and approved. And I'll move on to agenda on 8, publication and consultations. Pass over to Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Kelly Wiltshire is going to take items 8 and 9 for us as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Chair. Item 8 is publications and consultations. This is a standing item on our Nestrans Board agendas. Each time we give an update to the board on new things that have been published, new legislation or new consultations that have come out that are relevant to transport, and other things that are linked to our regional transport strategy that we think the board will be interested in. So the first one here is the National Transport Strategy Delivery Plan for this financial year was published, and we've put a link into there. The next one is the World Health Organization have recently published a walking and cycling latest evidence to support policy making in practice, which is very interesting. I've also pointed out here that one of the authors, Professor Adrian Davis from Napier University in Edinburgh, is actually coming to Aberdeen next week to do some training on our behalf. Entitled Road Transport and Public Health as part of our Health and Transport Action Plan. So that should be a very interesting event next week. And there's also an ongoing public consultation on the A96. And we have compiled a draft response to Transport Scotland on this public consultation. And that is in Appendix 1 of this report here. And we've also put in a link so you can have a look at the public consultation. And it's just recommended that the board note the publication of the National Transport Strategy Delivery Plan, note the publication of the World Health Organization's latest evidence on walking and cycling, and approve the draft consultation response for the A96 review. I'm happy to take any questions.
Right. Okay, there's no questions on that, so we'll take that we'll note the publication of the National Transport Strategy and the World Health Organization walking and cycling, and can we approve the draft consultation response for the A96? Okay, thank you. And Kelly, if you can move on to number 9, please.
Yep. Number 9, the information bulletin. Again, this is a standing item on a Nestrans board agenda. Again, this purpose of this report is just to give board members an overview on work that is happening that doesn't necessarily need any decision. So I've put an update here on Get About. Get About, for those members that aren't aware, is our sustainable travel brand in the North East that we use to promote road safety and sustainable travel. And it's used by all of our Get About partners, which are Aberdeenshire Council, Aberdeen City Council, ourselves, Nestrans, NHS Grampian, the 2 universities, the college and the Energy Savings Trust, and we all work together in partnership to do our promotion and marketing and events in order that we can do best use of limited resources and have consistent messaging. And in the past, that's allowed us to do television and radio adverts, bus shelter adverts and so on, that we wouldn't have actually been able to afford as individual organisations, but as a group and a partnership, we're able to do much bigger and wider campaigns. So we have just started a summer advertising campaign in the last week or so, which is focusing on promoting active travel, and it's also encouraging people to respect each other, particularly when in shared spaces like the Fermartin and Buchan Way or the Deeside Way, and act respectfully of each other and be aware of the recent changes to the Highway Code. We're also looking to do future campaigns on promoting bus use and public transport, as well as more road safety campaigns later in the year. And we also publish for each board our press and communications list, and we just give an overview of our news coverage and any media releases that we have sent out as well. And that's all available in Appendix 1. And again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, we have no questions on that, so we note that the board will note the contents of this report. Thanks very much for that, and we'll move on to item 11, pending business and reports for future meetings. Rab.
Thanks, Chair. I think we jumped one, which was 10 conferences and presentations, which is just really for noting to let members know of conferences, courses and presentations that have been recently or are due in the next few weeks. So it's merely for noting, and 11 pending business, again for noting, but I think from today's meeting I've taken a list of future reports that members have asked for coming back to future meetings, and I'll try and see which ones we can bring to September and which ones will need to go to further meetings of the board. But again, happy to take any questions, but they should just really be there for giving members an indication of what's going on. Thanks.
Right, there is no questions for that. My apologies for losing my way at the end there. Right, so that is, we're just noting the reports for the pending business, and that's the agenda finished for the day. Thank you very much. I would thank all the officers for their presentations. Been very interesting today, and I would say I've just got Maggie come back with a hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I appreciate it's been a reasonably long meeting. I was just wondering whether there was any intention to do any induction for the board as a whole. I appreciate that there's a number of very experienced councillors, some new councillors, some external board members, and if for no other reason, then it would be quite good to get to know each other. It might be helpful to have some induction, as well as just kind of doing any further introductions that people might need to Nestrans Board, what we do, what we've done in the past, some of our key linkages. But also appreciate that everybody's very busy, and the new councillors in particular will no doubt be having induction on lots of things that they're having to get their heads around just now.
No, I would certainly would welcome it, being new to it. So if I could put that over to maybe Rab to maybe put something together there, just for a general information session.
Yeah, absolutely. Be delighted to do a session either in person or online or one-to-one if people feel that they've been a bit swamped today with the 200 odd pages and the acronyms that we tend to use. I'm quite happy to do whatever suits members, particularly new members of the board. Something informal might even be nice, just to try and let members of the board meet in a less formal fashion, and maybe we could set something up along those lines if that would be helpful.
That would be great. Thank you. Most welcome. Councillor Ian Ewell.
Thanks. I'm not expecting an answer just now, but I would be very grateful if perhaps the chair, the vice chairs and RAB and the clerk could have a chat about the feasibility of maybe going back to in-person or to hybrid meetings, at least post the summer break. It's been great to see you all, not quite in the flesh today, but I think certainly in terms of getting to know each other or get reacquainted in my case, that certainly face-to-face is better if obviously the health situation permits post. But I just raise it today. I'm not asking you to make any decisions.
If I may, Chair,
yes.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ewell. I'm quite happy to look into and to discuss with the Chair and Vice Chairs options. I think we have potentially got rooms booked at Woodhill House for the dates of the coming meetings. There was an issue around hybrid meetings at Woodhill, which I'm hoping can be sorted over the next few weeks, if not already. So it's certainly something we'll look into and can let members know in plenty of time before the September meeting.
Right. I would come back on that one, that Woodhill, as we do seem to have solved the problems now. We've had some regular meetings in one of the rooms there, which is set up quite well. Councillor, oh no, it's gone. No, I think that was it. That's the last question. I think we can move to close the meeting now, unless there's any other points.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you.